A lot of football talk on today's episode of the Locked On Louisville podcast, from starting linebacker Monty Montgomery entering the transfer portal to Jeff Brohm and company recruiting in the state of Ohio. With that being said, let's get right on into the show.
You are Locked On Louisville, your daily podcast on the Louisville Cardinals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, what's going on, everyone? Welcome into another episode of the Locked On Louisville podcast. I'm your host, Dalton Pence. For those who are not aware of who I am, I serve as a credential media member for Cardinal Sports Zone. I also do some PA announcing work for the university in various sports. I want to take this time to say thank you all for making us your first listen of the day. Just a reminder that the Locked On Louisville podcast is free on all streaming services, including YouTube and WHAS 11 Plus, 5 days a week, your team every day. Some unfortunate news on Monday afternoon. Starting linebacker Monty Montgomery announced that he was entering the transfer portal. We'll talk about what that means for the Cardinals defense next season. We'll also talk about why I believe Jeff Brohm and company need to start creating the pipeline into the state of Ohio for recruiting. And the staff handed out 2 offers to players from Ohio, Aaron Scott Jr. and Ted Hammond. We'll talk about those respective recruitments in the final segment of the show. But to begin, some unfortunate news on Monday afternoon. Starting linebacker Monty Montgomery announced that he was entering the transfer portal. Now, Jeff Brohm and company have done a phenomenal job of holding this roster together for the most part. There have been some guys that have transferred out, guys that I honestly thought would have some significant roles next year. Luke Kandra on the offensive line, D. Wiggins, wide receiver, both transferred to Cincinnati. Some other players, Travion Cooley transferring to Georgia Tech, so on and so forth. This program lost to some guys that had produced the past couple seasons, but I looked at the roster as a whole and thought, well, it could have been a lot worse. And when you also look at the fact that there was a coaching change in early December and that the staff currently was able to retain a lot of the players, that's a huge win for the team heading into next season. Now, there are a handful of players that they lost to graduation, NFL, so on and so forth. But what they were able to do in the transfer portal over the past couple weeks, holding Flybill 23 together, adding to the high school recruiting class, here and there, for the most part, I think Jeff Brohm and company have done a job that is exceptional in many eyes. But this loss of Monty Montgomery, there's no, trying to sugarcoat it. It's a tough loss for 2 reasons. Number one, you lose one of your main leaders on defense. Monty Montgomery is a guy that has played for this team for the past handful of seasons. Last season, coming off of an ACL injury that he suffered in the 3rd game of 2021. He had 33 solo tackles, 70 combined, which was the most that he's had in his career for a season by over 20. He had a career high in sacks with 4, a career high in forced fumbles with, a career high in sacks with 6, 4 forced fumbles, which was a career high, and 2 interceptions, which was also a career high, 2 pass deflections, and guess what? Also a career high. So Monty Montgomery had a very, very solid season. The 5'11", 220-pound native of Norcross, Georgia, has been one of the leaders both on and off the field for this Cardinals program over the past couple seasons. So it is a huge, huge loss that I'm not going to try to spin it. There's no positive to look at this. It hadn't been announced officially when he was granted the extra year of eligibility from the NCAA. And I kind of thought that was a little bit weird, granted the year of eligibility, but there wasn't an official announcement from Monty or the school or the program that he was going to be returning. So I was wondering, when I talked in these podcasts, well, is he truly going to be back? Well, now it all makes sense. Another reason, and this is probably the main reason why this is such a huge loss for the Cardinals next season, is even with Monty Montgomery returning, there was still possibly help needed at the linebacker position. You lost Dorian Jones to Cincinnati. That's another transfer that was in line to see some starting reps. You lose Momo Sanogo to graduation and to the NFL. Yasir Abdullah, outside linebacker, is gone. Granted, it's big news that Ben Perry and KJ Cloyd both returned. They both took their name out of the transfer portal after entering. That's big news. You have Jalen Alderman, TJ Quinn, Jackson Hamilton, so on and so forth at the linebacker position. You may see a guy like Gilbert Frierson, the transfer from Miami, slide into the inside linebacker role in certain situations, but I look at him as more of a hybrid that plays more so on the outside and at the safety position rather than in the middle. But there were a lot of people that believed Stanquan Clark, the true freshman in the 2023 class, 4-star prospect from Miami, was going to be in line for a lot of snaps. And I don't disagree with that, but my concern with putting a true freshman into that position, and this is nothing against Stanquan. This is nothing against him at all. But I look all across the college landscape and see some of these highly rated 5-star linebackers and highly rated 4-stars across the country struggle to see the field in their first season or two because it's so difficult to learn the ins and outs of the defense, because essentially you're the quarterback of the defense, playing in the middle of the linebacker core. There's so much responsibility that you have. I look at guys like Harold Perkins for LSU, Devin White at LSU, multiple players, at Alabama, Georgia, so on and so forth, that didn't see the field their freshman season, that were definitely talented enough. It's just a matter of learning that position. I'm not saying that Stanquan Clark could not be an exception. I'm not saying that he is not going to be able to play a good amount of snaps next season, because I think he's going to be required to. But I just don't feel comfortable putting that much responsibility on a true freshman to go into a position to where there's so much responsibility, and it's really not all that fair to put that much responsibility on a true freshman, especially when, at this point in time, there doesn't seem to be, a true set-in-stone starter or starting linebacking core. Now, granted, with a possible 4-2-5 defense, the linebacker position kind of gives way to the versatility of the defensive back room. You start to see defensive backs, lining up in those hybrid linebacker roles, but you still need those box-to-box, edge-to-edge, sideline-to-sideline linebackers on the field. I think that this loss of Monty Montgomery means that Jeff Brohm and company are going to target a linebacker or two in the portal. I thought that they needed one even with Monty Montgomery seemingly returning. I definitely think that they need one now. It's the highest priority, and it's probably wise, in my opinion, if the defense, Ron English, Mark Hagen's Mark Ivy and company got a couple of linebackers in the portal to be able to, serve as the bridging the gap to the Stanquan Clark era. And another thing is, I think that this highlights that 2024 is going to be a big year for linebacker recruiting as well, because you have to continue to add depth to the position, and you have to get better at the linebacker position. But also, it's a reason to believe that, guys like TJ Quinn, Jalen Alderman, Jackson Hamilton, members of that 2021 class, they have to step up. KJ Cloyd has to step up. You have to see guys, maybe Cam Wilson, possibly a guy that maybe looks toward the middle. Who knows? Players have to step up by committee. It's probably a mixture of a handful of things. You have to address it via the portal. You have to get Stanquan Clark in a position to where he's really, really in a spot to succeed early on. And thankfully, he's an early enrollee, so already on campus. So he's already, going to be in the Cardinals strength and conditioning program, learning the playbook, so on and so forth, which is good that he's going to be in spring ball and before fall camp, so on and so forth. But you have to have your returning core step up as well. So huge loss. No way to sugarcoat it. Going to miss Monty Montgomery. We thank him so very much for his contributions over the past couple of years, and we wish him the best of luck in 2023. Moving right on along into the recruiting side of the show, Obviously, Jeff Brohm and company have made it a point of emphasis to start recruiting or continue to recruit the South Florida area very hard. I think it would be wise for the coaching staff to prioritize recruiting in the state of Ohio as well. Once we come back after the ad break, we'll talk about why that is. We'll do that here in just a second after we talk about our friends over at Built Bar. Looking for a delicious treat but don't want all of the fat and calories? Then you have to try a Built Bar. We just got through the holidays, and I know my goal is to eat a little bit healthier this year. If you're like me, where you want to eat healthier but really don't want to compromise that taste, then man, I've got the thing for you. You've got to try Built. Built allows you to be healthy while also having a tasty aspect as well. Seriously, they're so delicious, and you won't think they're good for you, but they truly are. What makes them good? Well, for starters, they're all covered in 100% real chocolate, but they have all of the healthy benefits of a protein bar, the unbelievable flavors like churro, peanut butter brownie, coconut almond, so on and so forth. The variety is absolutely insane. Head to your nearest Walmart today. Yes, that is right. You can get them at your local Walmart or Sam's Club now. Go to the pharmacy section, grab yourself a box of Built Bars. You can pick up a 4-bar box of cookies and cream, double chocolate, or coconut puffs. If you're close to Sam's Club, run in, grab a 13-bar box with our hit flavors, brownie batter, and churro. You can thank me later. Take advantage of all these new opportunities from our friends over at Built Bar. Hey, Cardinal fans, thanks again for making Locked On Louisville your first listen every day. Make sure to check out our brand new podcast, Locked On College Basketball. Everything you need to know about college basketball all in one place. Plus, hear from big-name experts, insiders, coaches, and players. Locked On College Basketball, available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. Heading right on along into the second segment of the show, I made the statement and claim that the Cardinals should start to prioritize and try to build a pipeline into the state of Ohio for Flyville 24 and beyond, and I fully stand by that opinion. Look, that's not saying that you have to, not prioritize the area of South Florida or Georgia or the state of Kentucky or Indiana or California or Texas, the recruiting hotbeds around the country. Atlanta area has been very, very solid. Getting Keywad and Brown from the Atlanta area in Flyville 23, Madden Sanker in Georgia, so on and so forth. But Adonijah Green as well in the state of Georgia. But I feel like the state of Ohio has been an area that could be possibly solid for the University of Louisville. Geographically speaking, it makes a lot of sense. Jeff Brohm made the comment at his press conference and beyond that there was essentially going to be a 5-hour radius surrounding the city of Louisville where the Cardinals were going to turn over every stone. They were going to go to these high schools. They were going to recruit these schools within a 5-hour radius. Well, obviously not verbatim because there are places in Ohio that are over 5 hours away, but you get what I'm saying. This includes the state of Indiana up through Indianapolis, through Cincinnati, west into St. Louis, south into the Nashville area, and throughout the state of Kentucky. I just think that the state of Ohio has been a place that has turned out a lot of very, very solid recruits, really for a long, long time. And the Louisville football program, for one reason or another, just hasn't really bothered to go into that area and compete with the likes of Ohio State, the Big Ten programs, Kentucky, so on and so forth. Let me make one thing perfectly clear. It's not going to be easy. Just because the Cardinals start to recruit the city of Cincinnati doesn't mean they're going to immediately create a pipeline. Just like the city of Miami in the South Florida area, you're going to face some very, very tough competition. It's just not going to be Miami, Florida, Florida State, and some SEC schools now. But now the competition becomes the state school, Ohio State. You have Cincinnati in their backyard. There's also Michigan, Notre Dame, Michigan State, Nebraska, Penn State. There are a lot of solid programs in the Big Ten that really try to create that pipeline into Ohio because there's a lot of very, very good players that consistently come out of that area on a year in, year out basis. We've seen Mark Stoops and company ever since, hiring Vince Morrow and really since he took over at the helm of the Wildcats program in Lexington, Ohio has been his pipeline. Sure, he's gotten players from Florida. He's gotten a lot of the players from the Bluegrass State and the surrounding areas, but he's done a very, very good job of going into the state of Ohio and getting a lot of these top players. I'm trying to think of some highly rated guys out of that area. I know that they're slipping my mind, but they've gotten some very good players that have absolutely been trouble for Louisville over the past couple of seasons, really since he took over. What I thought was interesting, and you talk about the quality of players in Ohio, and we're going to talk about some underrated players here in the next segment, but the top 30 prospects in the 2024 24/7 Sports Composite, the top 30 prospects in the state of Ohio, all of them are in the top 700. In fact, doing the research, 18 of those are in the top 500, and there are currently 12 composite 4-stars in the state of Ohio. It's going to be a lot tougher to recruit the northern part of the state because you're getting up around more so Buckeye territory, closer to South Bend, Penn State, so on and so forth, right? Michigan. This is more so directed toward the southern half of the state with a lot of emphasis put on the city of Cincinnati. I'm not saying that you have to go into Ohio and get 5 recruits every single cycle, but trying to develop those pipelines, and we'll talk about a player from Cincinnati St. X that just landed a Louisville offer and that was on campus recently in Ted Hammond, why it's solid to and a solid idea to go out and try to build those pipelines. And it seems like that's what Jeff Brohm and company are trying to do, something that the university just really hasn't been good at over the past past decade or so. You look at, there's a 5-star, Bryce West. Now, granted, like I'm saying, it's going to be a lot easier said than done. But if Louisville can go into the South Florida area and they can get a guy like TJ Capers, the number 2 player in the state of Florida, you can go out and get a 4-star player like Isaac Brown from the state or from the city of Miami, Stanquan Clark, William Fowles, both 4-star guys. There's no reason why you can't be able to develop that pipeline into southern Ohio as well. Now, granted, each geographical area is going to present its own recruiting challenges because you're going up against some very, very solid competition. Ohio State, Miami, the NIL realm, I think, puts Louisville in a spot to where they can at least compete with some of these programs. They're probably not going to win a lot of head-to-head battles with Ohio State. They're probably not going to win a lot of head-to-head battles with Miami and Florida State. But, getting a player here and there, getting a couple recruits here and there, you just never know. There's just no downside to me, in my opinion, than trying to create that pipeline into southern Ohio. Looking into the guys of Cincinnati, the number 2 player in Ohio from Cincinnati, number 3, number 4, we'll talk about here in a second, from the other side of the southern part of the state. Let's see, number 9 from Cincinnati, number 10 from Cincinnati. Going on down, there are a lot of players that are from the Cincinnati area. Number 22 from the Cincinnati area. So number 25, you get what I'm saying here, and I think that maybe what I'm saying is one of those things like, okay, Dalton. Sure, Louisville needs to go into southern Ohio, into the Cincinnati area. What are you trying to say here? Does this really need a segment of the show? Well, it does, because let's be honest, this program hasn't really tried to get into that geographical area all that well. And if they have, they haven't succeeded. Jeff Brohm has done a great job of recruiting this Ohio Valley area, the state of Indiana. That has to increase as well, the ability to recruit the state of Indiana, the state recruiting of Kentucky, the recruiting of Ohio as well. So I think that this would allow Louisville to continue to try to bring in the best recruits from across the country. In one area that really makes no sense for them not to try to get involved is the southern Ohio area. Speaking of 2 players from Ohio, the southern Ohio area, that recently received offers from the University of Louisville, Aaron Scott Jr. and Ted Hammond. We'll talk about both of those here in just a second. Before we do that, I want to say thank you all once again for making us your first listen of the day. It does not go unappreciated. Thanks again for all of the subscriptions, comments, likes, rates, all that you all do on all streaming services. I definitely appreciate it. We just got to 1.1K YouTube subscribers, so very, very excited. The numbers from January 2022 to January 2023 have steadily grown, and I am very, very appreciative. So all of the support is extremely welcomed, and I'm very, very grateful. Heading into the final segment of the show, talking about two players that have recently gotten offers from the University of Louisville. One is Aaron Scott Jr., the 123rd best prospect in the 24/7 Sports Composite 2024 football class, the 12th best cornerback, and the 4th best in the state of Ohio. He currently holds a crystal ball prediction to Ohio State, but the Cardinals were his 27th offer, and he has offers from a lot of top programs. Guess who's involved? Well, Vince Morrow and the Kentucky Wildcats, talking about trying to continue that Ohio pipeline. He is extremely interested in Kentucky. Native of Springfield, Ohio, which I believe is on the southwestern side of the state. He has offers from Cincinnati, Georgia Tech, Louisville now, Michigan, Michigan State, Notre Dame, Oklahoma, Mississippi, Pittsburgh, Tennessee, so on and so forth, Wisconsin. You get what I am saying. A lot of Big Ten offers in the mix for Aaron Scott Jr. 6'1", 170 pounds, star of Springfield High School. When you watch his film, it's hard not to like what you see on film with his athleticism and his size for the position. Does a good job in man coverage and solid at pressing on the line of scrimmage. A good job of going step for step with faster receivers. Like I said, has solid speed and athleticism for being 6'1". 170 pounds listed on his recruiting site. We'll probably have to add a little bit of strength at the next level, but being a high school junior going into his senior season, I don't necessarily think that that's a concern at all. Solid job at high pointing the football and is a ball hawk. And I think that he's a player that the ranking kind of speaks for itself. So interested to see how far Louisville is able to get in this recruitment. As I said, I feel like a broken record. They need to work to get Aaron on campus for a visit and see what Flyville, the brand, can do for guys in the Southern Ohio area. Another player from the Cincinnati area actually is a little bit underrated in the 2024 class, 6'5", 258 defensive lineman Ted Hammond from Cincinnati St. X. St. X is a powerhouse in the state of Ohio. He's ranked as the 23rd best defensive lineman, 10th best prospect in the state of Ohio, according to 24/7 Sports. Doesn't have a composite rating yet, so it seems like when the ratings come out, he's going to rise up the rankings, considering that over the past month he has, or actually the past week, past 3 days, he has offers from Louisville, Michigan, and Oklahoma. So it's obvious that big-time schools are starting to come around. You watch his film, plays both on the interior and on the edge, moves extremely well for 6'5", 258. A solid work with his hands, fighting off opposing offensive linemen. But this is kind of what I'm talking about. You see these lower-rated guys that kind of rise up the recruiting rankings in some very, very talented areas like Atlanta, Miami. I'm not saying that Cincinnati is comparable to those two areas, but it's no slouch either. Cincinnati turns out a lot of players on a year-in, year-out basis. So it is very, very possible that guys get a little bit overlooked in the area, but being able to create pipelines into St. X. I know Mollard used to be a great football program. I'm not sure if it still is. Other places in Cincinnati, just great historic football programs, especially in that area up by the Kentucky-Ohio border. This is a recruitment that I would love to see Louisville get into the mix. It's going to be tough because all of the big-time schools are starting to come around because they see that potential. I'm not necessarily sure if he projects as more of a interior defensive lineman or on the edge, but judging by the offer post on Twitter, it looks like Hammond was on campus recently, possibly at the was it called the Brunch and Ball? I believe it was what it's called, where the junior day, where Louisville had a lot of guys from across the country, especially in the Kentucky and Ohio area, into the Cardinals program. So I think that this is a recruitment that I would feel solid that the Cardinals got him on campus. I would love to try to, get him back on campus for another visit in the spring, have another weekend, like Flyville had, at the end of January last year, heading into the spring, for spring ball, get a good list of visitors with Hammond, with Aaron Scott as well, that you can be able to build off of and try to create some momentum in the Ohio area. So I'm very, very interested to see how, the recruiting goes in the state of Ohio, but I hope to see that pipeline start to form. The creation on that start to form. But obviously, we talked about the loss of Monty Montgomery, what that means for the Louisville football program and the defense next season, and Ohio recruiting, or beginning to talk about Ohio recruiting. So tomorrow's episode, I believe we'll talk a little bit more about the basketball recruiting side of things, talk about Trenton Flowers, possibly. I haven't really decided on what the basis for the show is going to be tomorrow. So stay tuned for that. But that's going to wrap up this Tuesday edition of the show. Everyone have a great day. We'll see you right back here tomorrow.